Many people think, oh, an aircraft, it's a small, localized environment that should be pretty easy to shoot. I would almost agree if it weren't so incredibly hard. The small space is actually what makes it extremely hard. First off, you're in a small enclosed cylinder, a 6 foot cylinder, and there's not a whole lot of places to hide lights, to set up your camera, to set up a tripod, and being able to set lights up and tripods up and all is what makes our pictures stand out. Sure, you can go in with an iPhone and take pictures, but you're not going to get that great a picture. The reason we get good pictures is because I have a history of working in luxury architectural photography. The good thing about luxury photography and high-end homes for sale and things like that is you've got 15, 18, 20-foot ceilings and lots of places to put your lights and to put your camera. And wherever you want to put your camera, there's room enough for a tripod. In an aircraft, not so much. So one of the first things that makes an aircraft hard to shoot in is the confined space. The second thing I would say is that you're combining a lot of different sorts of light sources. You've got daylight coming through the windows. You've got LED or halogen lights in the cabin itself. I bring in flash. And I do that because that's the best light I can use to compensate for all these other sorts of lights that are in the cabin. Have you ever seen a picture of a cabin where there's bright orange or bright yellow? That's because the photographer didn't know how to deal with different light temperatures. I neutralize those lighting differences. Sometimes it's not even just the natural light that you have to deal with. I did an ACJ the other day, and it had a lot of purple lights in the cove lighting and the strip lighting and all that. And we were also under the gun. We only had a very limited time to shoot it. So I didn't have a whole lot of time to mess with the lighting and neutralize it on site. So to compensate for the lack of time that we had on site, I had to spend a lot of time in Photoshop in post-production taking that purple out. But we got it out and we made the cabin look very neutral. You get a natural looking cabin, not a cabin with all kinds of strange, bright, and sometimes just unacceptable lighting sources. Another thing you may think is in a confined space like that, well, all I need to do is get a very ultra wide lens and then shoot it all. And honestly, nothing is further from the truth. I try and use lenses that are in the 20 to 35 millimeter range because that gives more of a feel of what the cabin is really like. When you shoot ultra wide like that, in many ways, I think it betrays what the cabin is really like. The cabin isn't all fish-eyed and all these weird angles that fish-eyes present. It's a lot more intimate. And I think using longer lenses and knowing the proper lens to use brings that intimacy in. And that's really important in a lot of the aircraft that we shoot. Even though you want to show that there's a lot of space in the cabin of your 737 or your A320, you also want to show that it's intimate and there's people spaces. So lens choice is very, very important. Another problem that we face, both interior and exterior, is unwanted reflections or unwanted objects. When we're on the ramp, there may be a fuel truck we can't move, or orange cones, or other people's planes in the background. And those just won't do to be in the pictures, at least the way I take them. I'm here to feature your aircraft. I'm not here to show your aircraft with 6 other aircraft around it or a fuel truck or cones. My job is to make your aircraft stand out. Sometimes we can move the aircraft to a section of the ramp where there's nothing behind it or where, the background is a lot prettier, and sometimes we can't. I was doing a prototype aircraft not too long ago in not Houston, Fort Worth. And it could not move at all. It literally, they said, where do you want it built? And they built the plane up for me, and I had to shoot it there. So I made a lot of compromises in those choices. I got it where I wanted in relationship to the hangar opening and all that. But let's just say that the hangar was less than ideal as a place to put that aircraft. So I had to do a lot of work cleaning up the background, taking workers out of the background. There was nothing I could do about that. That was the situation I was faced with. I knew that going in. We set the aircraft up to take advantage of that as best as we could. And then I dealt with the rest of it in Photoshop and in post-production. Sometimes that's all you can do. Knowing that going in is part of what I do, what I call shooting for the edit. It means I know I've got problems. I shoot so that I can lessen those problems in editing, but still solve them. There's a lot of other problems too. Aircraft are, by their very nature, very glossy, so they show a lot of reflections. Do we want to see them or do we not? These are all things I consider when I'm editing and when I'm shooting. There's a lot I can do to keep the reflections down. And then there's a lot I can do in post-production to minimize the reflections I don't want. There's also times I want those reflections. So it really depends on each individual aircraft and each individual session for what I'm trying to show. And I can't say there are any rules. There's just knowing how to deal with each of those situations. Another thing that you have to deal with in aircraft that you don't have to deal with in any other commercial photography is the airport itself. How busy is the airport? Can we go on the ramp? How far out on the ramp can we go? I had airport operations come down to our shoot and help me coordinate so that we could do different things that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to do. But because we coordinated with the airport and airport operations beforehand, they were more than willing to come out and help us get the job done. And that is one thing I do have to say about this sort of business is that everybody all seems to pitch in to try and help make the best pictures possible. And that's one thing I really like about doing this job is, everybody from the FBOs to the crew to the airport operations to, you know, the taxi driver who drove me to the airport. They all want the best pictures possible. And I think when we all pitch in and work together, that's exactly what we're going to achieve. Because we're all on the same team. We all have one goal, and that's to make that plane look as good as it can. Another thing that's hard to deal with aircraft that is unique to aircraft also is so much comes into play the day of the shoot. There could be delays for weather, or there could be delays because of something happening at the airport, or maintenance may not be done, or it may not even be at the airport yet, or the principal may decide that he wants to go somewhere else. There are so many different things that come into play that make that shoot, even though it's supposed to start at 8 or 10, make it start at 2 or 4. And, there's been more than one shoot that I've had to delay at least a day because of that. I'm ready for that. And that's one of the things I almost expect with aviation. No shoot ever starts on time. No shoot ever ends on time. It's all about everybody working together. I give up a little bit of my time so that the avionics people can get into that cabin, and maybe I'll go shoot the labs or the back bedrooms or something like that while they're fixing the cockpit, and then we can switch. It's all about working together and getting the job done. And I think in aviation photography, that is more important than just about any other photography. We have limited time, and I want to keep that aircraft grounded as little as possible. So I try and get my part of the job done within my time constraints and what I promised the client. Our last problem is nature itself. I've already mentioned weather delays, but where the sun is and where the sun is in relationship to the airplane is very, very important. If we're doing a twilight, we're going to want that sun behind the aircraft right as it's setting. And that means moving the aircraft. And if it's an aircraft that can't be moved, it means setting up the shots so that we take advantage of that. It's being knowledgeable about where the sun is going to be all through the day and taking advantage of that where I can. I may not want the sun streaming in the windows, or I may. Sometimes that makes a picture. I think sometimes that light streaming in really shows elegance. But it's all about what the client needs, the client's purpose for the images, and what we have time for. All of those things have to come together. And so it's not photography like any other. You have to be cognizant of all these different things. You have to be cognizant of what can be moved, when it can be moved, what the other people around you are doing. There's just so much that comes into play. It's not simply walking in and taking a couple of pictures. I hope I don't sound like I'm complaining. I enjoy the challenge. I view photography as kind of like a puzzle or a maze or, a problem to be solved. And my solutions also have to benefit all the other people around me. And in some ways it's like a real role-playing game or something like that, and I really enjoy that. And when we end up winning, when we end up coming out with pictures that are better than the client expected, we've all won. And I think that's the biggest payoff for anything that I do. I'm Dave Coach with AeroMedia, and may your next shoot be your best shoot.